So let's start on the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court is given its authority under Article 3 of our Constitution, which states that the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So there you go. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. So I'm going to stop here. It's important to remember we're talking about federal judges right now. Okay? Federal, the Supreme Court, the Appellate Court, District Court, federal judges. Under federalism, there are state judges also. This has nothing to do with any of them. This has just been a point of confusion in the past. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority, to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and a citizen of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states, citizens or subjects. So what I've just read is what they have jurisdiction over. In all cases infecting ambassadors, other public ministers, councils, and to those in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. Original jurisdiction meaning don't start in the district court, don't start in the appellate court, go right there to the Supreme Court if it's affecting an ambassador or other public minister, say the Secretary of the Treasury. In all other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, which means you work your way up from the district court or appellate court, whichever court is appropriate to file that case in, or on whatever it is the first time. And it might eventually work its way up to the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court chooses to hear it. Both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. Okay, so the trial of all crimes except in cases of impeachment, meaning like if what's coming to mind right now is one of President Trump's impeachments, shall be by jury. So there was no jury in President Trump's impeachment cases as we would think of it. The Senate of the United States acted as a jury then. And such trial shall be held in the state where the said crimes shall have been committed. But when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such place or places as the Congress may, by law, have directed. All right, so you rob a bank in Illinois. The trial is going to be in Illinois, probably in the county in which you robbed the bank. If it's not committed within any state, okay, so say you do something, I don't know, in international waters. You're brought back to the United States for trial. My hunch is that the Congress would not decide where you were going to have your trial, but it would be decided by some other government official or government body where that was going to be tried. All right. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. So you have treason. A definition of treason shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Definition of treason might be on the test. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses. All right. Part 1, or on confession in open court. All right, so you grow a conscience and you say, yes, I gave our nuclear secrets to the North Koreans. lock me up. I doubt that would ever happen, you know, that somebody would confess just like that, but it's there. It's in the Constitution. So I'm just walking you through the Constitution. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. So this is like a medieval throwback. If I commit treason, I'm the only one who's going to be punished. If after I die, my daughter Victoria is still, you know, she is not going to have any sort of punishment or have anything done or happen to her by the government of the United States because of what I did during my life. So the case we're going to look at is Douglas Chandler. These are notes I took from an article that I'm going to have under the videos if you'd like to read it. So this guy is Douglas Chandler. He was a U.S. Navy service member during the First World War. After that ended, he was a stockbroker in the late 1920s, and you can guess what happened next. 1929, the Great Depression, the stock market crash. He and his wife lost everything. So Chandler was pretty good at writing, taking pictures. He turned to journalism and took a job at the Baltimore News American. He was thought to be charming but arrogant by his colleagues. So he grew increasingly pessimistic about the state of the nation, didn't like the direction the country was headed, and he began to blame his failure on the Jews. I don't know why. I'm not going to play armchair psychologist. That was just what he did. So in 1931, the Chandlers and their two rather unfortunate daughters set sail for France. And Douglas discovered a great passion for photography and Nazism. And he bought a camera. He became a freelance photographer, went to Germany for the first time. He was introduced to the Nazi press department's attaché and general counsel in Munich, which was a pretty big deal. Those weren't like super high-ranking officials, but he wasn't being introduced to, you know, just nobodies. So the associate editor, and this was after, of course, Chandler asked, of National Geographic magazine, which is still around today, proposed that Chandler write an article about Berlin. And National Geographic, if you're familiar with the magazine at all, it doesn't do like attack essays or, you know, it isn't political. It's an informative magazine. But so the editor that Chandler was working with wanted the story to be of a kindly nature and apolitical. So Chandler agrees and produced a 9,000-word essay titled Berlin, City of Rivers and Trees, and he got $500 for his trouble. And this is the magazine that he published in. They changed the name of the essay to Changing Berlin with 30 illustrations. And in 1937, Chandler met Ulrich von Berlau, who was in charge of recruiting Americans and Brits for Goebbels' propaganda ministry. Goebbels was the Nazi propaganda chief. So he had other assignments with National Geographic. He returned to Germany in 1938, and again, really becoming a fervent ardent fan of Nazism and the German state. He says, I find a thrilling and admirable new social order in the process of beginning here. So the people at National Geographic should have started to be worried, but it took until 1939 when a friend of Chandler's magazine editor paid a visit to the family. He wrote back to National Geographic that the disturbing thing to me was that Mr. Chandler was more pro-Nazi and anti-Jewish than any man I met anywhere on our trip. And that raised the alarm, because National Geographic, this I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, was one of the illustrations included in his essay. The man was an ardent Nazi lover to the end. So the magazine sent a staff member to corroborate this allegation, and he came back and confirmed the allegation was truthful. So the editor ordered Chandler's correspondence stopped. He canceled an upcoming assignment that he had given Chandler to Albania and reported Chandler to the U.S. government. So he covered himself pretty good. So in 1940, the U.S. consul, which is kind of like, just think of it as an ambassadorial sort of position, in Italy, he ordered all Americans back to the USA because it was pretty clear at that time that war was going to be happening in Europe. Chandler got a visa to take him and his family to Germany instead. So he said, no, I don't think so. We're going to Germany. And once there, he offered his services for free to Goebbels' propaganda recruiter. And in return, he got his own radio show, and the Nazis managed to pipe that into the U.S. via shortwave radio, which couldn't be controlled. So Americans heard it, and he went by the radio name of Paul Revere. He was given specific material for the broadcast and told exactly what to say and how to say it and everything in daily meetings that were led by Goebbels. And 1 month into the program, for some reason, Chandler revealed his identity. So he made trouble for his bosses. If you remember a few slides ago, I said that the people he worked with considered him charming but arrogant. He disliked his show's music. The other announcers he worked with, and being told what to say. So his Nazi bosses suspended him and threatened him with a lawsuit. And he seemed to have learned his lesson, because he got back into radio after Pearl Harbor was bombed. And he said, yes, by all means, let Pearl Harbor be avenged, but not upon the Japanese, upon the real authors of this war, the Jews. Again, I don't know. It makes no sense to me. I don't know how somebody thinks this way. I'm just relaying the facts. That's all. Just the facts. In 1942, the U.S. began prosecuting traitors, and they indicted Chandler, of course. And once Chandler found out about this, he, of course, blamed the Jews for whatever reason. But his broadcasts changed tone. They became increasingly mild post-indictment because he knew he was in trouble. He was apprehended after victory in Europe, and his case took about 2 years to get to trial. It was estimated that 150,000 to 300,000 Americans had heard Chandler's program. The article, which was published by National Geographic, didn't get into what effect that might have had, but he was working against his country, giving aid to Nazi Germany. So Chandler's lawyers offered a defense of insanity, and that didn't hold up at all because the guy wasn't insane. They put up 20 witnesses, the prosecution, and 16 had worked directly with Chandler. So he was found guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison and a $10,000 fine. He served 15 years of that. And after 15 years, the U.S. Attorney General announced that Chandler would be released into the care of one of his daughters. And he was pretty old. He was 73 at this point in the game. An Episcopal minister, after the release, because all that what was left after the release was the payment of the fine. That was still in play. He appealed directly to the president, who was John F. Kennedy now, about Chandler's case. He got his sentence commuted, so he didn't have to pay the fine, and Chandler returned to Germany after that. And sometime later, he sent a letter to National Geographic asking for reimbursement for expenses accrued for an assignment that was canceled due to the war. And that was the last anybody heard of him, at least officially. And that's the story of Douglas Chandler. We'll get into John Jay in part 2.